Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos and a new Diablo 4 video. Today we're talking about the three main classes of the early access, that being your Rogue, your Barbarian, and of course your Sorcerers. Each class has a variety of build options, but we've come to the conclusion there are a couple really good options per one, and I'm going to highlight one great option for each. This should give you something to work towards and have an idea going into the free access next week. I myself am a Rogue main, and generally the two paths that we see with this type of class is a ranged focused or a melee focused build. Ultimately both will absolutely crush AoE mobs and have some kind of single target strategy, though in my experience the single target seems to be better with ranged and AoE seems to be better with melee. This build that you're looking at is all around twisting blades and melee, however, because it clears out packs of groups incredibly quickly. To give you an idea of how this works then, we're going to be using our shadow clone and our self-buff shadow imbuement to prepare ourselves as the fight begins. We're going to shadow step to an ideal target, someone at the back of the group or a strong enemy, and hit them with twisting blades. This will now put a blade in them that will then rip itself back towards me, so I want that rip to go through the pack of enemies. So I'll use something like a dash to dash through the enemies, making them weaker and also deal damage, and then the twisting blade will follow me through the group, smashing through them. Because I've imbued, I'll have exploded a bunch of them, and the whole group should die in that single moment, which is incredibly effective and very fun to do. Against a normal weak group of enemies, if I buff up, drop it, then we'll go ahead and jump to the target, dash through, and then they'll all just explode like so. And it's incredible. Why is this so good? Well, it's just incredibly mobile and evasive. It allows for constant damage evasion, basically. It's also obviously extremely AoE bursty and focused, where you can clear groups at these incredible rates. It functions really well in single target though, thanks to the ultimate ability in Shadow Clone. Then our ability to just dash in, twisting blade, and jump away on a weakened enemy. It kind of lets us deal damage over a period of time from safe distance, in and out, without really committing and having to trade blows. That is certainly not what we want to do as a rogue. But now let's explain the abilities, the talents, and how I've spent and why. Let's begin from the top then. Our basic of choice is Invigorating Strike. This basic attack is great because it helps us regenerate energy. We can enhance it with 1 point just to make that slightly more effective when we're dealing with an injured enemy. That brings us to our next tier, where we're going to pick up the 5 levels of Twisting Blade total. This is going to increase the damage and piercing damage of it, and as it is our core main damage dealer, maximizing this level is obviously worth it. Not only does it do that great damage on return, but it also makes the target that we impale take 8% increased damage. So generally you want to impale the big bad, the strongest enemy that you want to take down with the extra damage. We can enhance that with basic enhanced twisting blades, making them deal 30% more damage during the return, and finally advanced twisting blades, which helps us get cooldowns faster, just keep zipping around and doing everything really quick. For our next tier then, we have our evasive agile movement. So we have just 1 level of dash. What's really important about dash is actually enhanced dash. Basically, if you dash through someone with enhanced dash, they take 20% increased critical strike damage for 5 seconds. So you want to be striking people with enhanced dash, then hitting them hard with your main damage dealers while they're vulnerable. Lastly, we also have methodical dash. So if anything's CC'd in any way, this cooldown is greatly reduced. On the other hand, we have a level in shadow step. This allows us to target an enemy and just blink next to them and deal damage. We can enhance that with the enhanced shadow step, giving us extra critical chance after we use it, and also disciplined shadow step. As we zip around the battlefield hitting different targets, it just reduces the cooldown so we can keep doing it. For our next tier, pretty much bypass this entirely. We don't want to worry about those, and go to the imbuement, where we're of course picking up shadow imbuement. This is what's causing everything to explode. We imbue our weapons, then deal damage with an imbuable ability. In this tree, we can also pick up 2 incredible skills: Shadow Crash, causing stuns via shadow damage at 10% rate, and 3 out of 3 on consuming shadows, because every time we kill an enemy with shadow damage, we generate 30 energy. This is basically how we're keeping energy at all times between this and our basics. This allows us to spam abilities. Lastly, in the ultimate tree then, we're obviously picking up Shadow Clone, a big 1-minute ultimate ability. We're enhancing that not once but twice with Prime Shadow Clone, meaning we're even unstunnable for 5 seconds when we use it, and Supreme, where it deals 20% extra damage, so 80% total. It's kind of nuts. It's really awesome. You may notice that we have like 1 level of Barrage and Penetrating Shot and some of these other imbuments. That's just because the equipment we're wearing gives us a level, but it's totally irrelevant. When it comes to legendaries then, you're going to want something that has relevance to the skills that we're actually using. Take my weapon. My Shadow Clone also mimics the imbuements. So if I pull out my Shadow Clone, then imbue, my Shadow Clone then has 26% increased damage for 5 seconds. That's nuts. Or we can enhance our Shadow Step, giving it an extra charge, and also refunding the cooldown if you kill someone with it. The other legendaries that I have don't really have relevant skills. They're just passive things that are beneficial to any class or this class as a whole. Anything that's going to help you with the active abilities, ideally Twisting Blades, that's what you're looking for. So that's the Rogue build. This is our melee AoE smasher. It's a very fun, super high speed build, rewarding those with fast reactions and punishing those without. Let's move on then next to our Sorcerer. The Sorcerer in general is powerful as hell, but limited by its mana pool since its abilities cost a lot of mana. Super quickly, you'll often find yourself just out of mana normally. This build addresses that while also making you tanky as hell. You'll be fantastic at clearing in AoE, causing lots of slows and even hard CC in the form of chills and freezes, and basically when something gets frozen, it's all but dead. This means you have brilliant control of enemies you face, leading nicely into the boss fights where you can help keep things under control. This comes from things like ice armor and the ability to maintain it constantly. We take massively reduced damage while it's on, and in turn it also helps us with the mana problem. The build manages both AoE and single target pretty equally, but I wouldn't say it shines overly hard or overly weak in other or one aspect. Many builds are really good AoE, bad single target, or vice versa. This is a nice mix of both, and that's why I think it's a good pick for leveling, especially at launch, because it's sort of a jack of all trades. With that explained, let's take a look at the talents and why we're spending this way. Firstly, for our basic, we're picking Frostbolt. That's our basic attack, and it causes chill at 15% every time you use it. This slows enemies and lets us avoid damage where possible. We also pick up the enhanced version to potentially cause explosions on currently chilled enemies, or if they're frozen, it guarantees happens, so it's just constant AoE on a basic attack if you see that effect, and the build's all about freezing. For one AoE ability, we get our Chain Lightning. We have that 3 ranks. That lightning, which bounces between packs of enemies for that great AoE. We also pick up its enhancement to increase its crit chance, and then greater Chain Lightning for a 25% increased damage if it bounces off us directly, so when we're up close to the pack. Next is the all-important Ice Armor, making you very tanky during its buff. Our damage will also increase the amount of shield we get, so the more damage you deal, the more shield you have, and so on. Plus, with Ice Armor enhancement, the shield also gives that important 25% more mana while it's active. So obviously you want it active all the time. Lastly, we pick up Shimmering Ice Armor to freeze enemies that strike us occasionally. That's perfect synergy with the basic attack I mentioned, as well as the CC itself. We pick up Hydra next at 3 ranks. This is a very important DPS summon that spits fire, and if we pick up the enhancement, it'll get extra Hydra heads for more damage, and Invoked Hydra, that provides bursts of crit whenever we get crit. In the next section, we mostly pick up passives, but we do get another ability. For passives, we have Icy Veil for 5% increased barrier duration, which is very nice, and 1 level of Snap Freeze for a 3% chance to instantly freeze on any frost skill. So obviously that's fantastic when it does happen, but it is relatively rare, but in packs of enemies, you will see it often. Next, we have Blizzard though, a main ability to further chill enemies in an area, dealing nice AoE damage as well. You might consider Frost Orb as an alternative, but we prefer Blizzard. Finally, the ultimate, Deep Freeze, which is what allows us to have that massive AoE while completely frozen ourselves in a block, making you totally immune to damage, even chilling the enemies around you. It's definitely worth enhancing this then with Prime Deep Freeze, giving us a very convenient barrier, powered by how many enemies are actually frozen around the ultimate when we come out of that block. So that's the basis of the build and the talents we use for it. Let's reference legendaries real quick. Basically, we want ones that help the build in any relevant way. Your legendaries should be helping the build in specific ways though. Skills that you've picked up that are being directly enhanced or changed in useful ways by these legendaries. For example, here's one where while we're healthy, our CC is increased in duration by 48%, as well as giving us a spike of crit whenever enemies are injured, which is nice. There's this weapon, which causes enemies to become vulnerable half the time they freeze, meaning when they freeze, there's a 50% chance you're just going to destroy them. Or there's another weapon here that we saw, providing 31% increased damage while our barrier's up, which, you know, you want all the time in this build, so just 31% damage up permanently, that's ridiculous. The other legendaries Josh has at this time generally provide passive benefits for any build really, but the ones we looked at in specific, those are the ones we care about. You want things that enhance the abilities of the passives you have. But that's our Sorcerer build. Let's move on now to the Barbarian. Our up and front and center class then, the big Barbarian. With this build, we're able to bleed foes into submission, allowing for some important single target DPS through those dots, while still being an absolute AoE monster. We'll build Fury and spread bleeds out, rend targets for even more bleed, flay to bleed yet again while causing even more vulnerabilities, and rupture it all to trigger the bleed effects in one single moment. All that dot damage instantaneously popping. This bleed dot base build then is a true builder spender, building up all those debuffs and effects just to pop them all in one satisfying moment, or building up to then go absolutely ham during a wrath. For this build then, our main weapon will be a two-handed sword, which are basically bleed focused weapons, making them an ideal pick for this. Of course, we also have other utility to use, like the hamstring effect, which will slow enemies that are currently bleeding, helping you kite them while you're weaving in more abilities on managing things, and survival stuff like Iron Skin. There's also Rallying Cry, and that ultimate Wrath of the Berserker, which while popped gives you a burst of speed and a staggering 25% increased damage per 50 fury you spend during, skyrocketing your damage. So as I said, you build up all your resources, you berserk, you go mad in that wrath, and spend it all as fast as you can. Through this gameplay, our AoE will see us alternate between flays and rends to spend fury, popping rupture whenever you got a nice amount of bleed spread out, whereas in single target boss fights, you save that fury up to spend it all during that ultimate, the wrath, going crazy in that one moment, and then falling back to build up safely again. That's the concept though. Let's talk about the build in detail, looking at the talents. Starting from the top, we have our basic attack choice, which is Flay. This important pick is of course a bleed based attack, and by enhancing this one, we have a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable with that, doubled with our two-handed weapon. Then with Battle Flay, we have a 10% increase to bleeding damage on Flay itself, which is nice. Next is our core ability Rend, which cleaves enemies in front, as well as causing another 5-second bleed. We want to buff this one hard because it's a main source of damage, so we push that with 5 points straight into it. That increases the damage and the bleed damage all importantly. Naturally, we can enhance it further with Enhanced Rend, causing Rend to extend any vulnerabilities, and then we take Furious Rend, causing Rend to now grant 4 fury per enemy that's hit, capped at 20 to keep it fair. So that's now a great AoE fury builder. Next then we get Rallying Cry at just 1 level. For the movement speed buff and the resource generation improvements with it, this actually buffs allies as well though, important to note in parties. We'll enhance it for a nice unstoppable effect during, so no CC can stop us during the cry. Then we take Strategic Rallying Cry to make it fortify 10% of your base life, aka 10% reduced damage during that, and it gives us extra base life each time we take damage during. Up next is Iron Skin, again at just 1 level, really giving us important survival options. It's a barrier absorbing 50% of our missing life, ideal when intentionally trading during say the big Wrath DPS moments, and we can enhance that for an extra 5% and pick up Tactical Iron after that, which makes it heal for 10% of the barrier's original amount per second. Moving on though, we skip the next chunk entirely and move down to 1 level of Rupture. That's the thing that causes all the bleed to pop in one moment. We use this the moment we already have a bleed or multiple on a target, causing all the bleed damage to basically hit at once. We'll enhance this of course for extra bleeding damage and grab Warrior's Rupture for 20% extra attack speed on use. Here we also pick up the great passive Hamstring, so our bleeds now slow enemies by 10% as a great utility. Also we can get 1 level of Pit Fighter here, which is a nice 3% increased damage when close to enemies, and a nice 2% reduction to distant damage. But this really lets us reach No Mercy to try to get the 2 levels at least there. From that we get 6% increased crit strike against any CC'd enemies, which is really important because if they're all bleeding, they're all slowed, so this works there. Finally, our ultimate Wrath of the Berserker for the massive DPS buff during its effect. Now Cotton's too low in this specific footage, but here we would also pick up Prime Wrath of the Berserker for the 20% movement speed increase and also the fury generation by 30%. But most importantly, after that is Supreme Wrath, which we would grab, which is the thing that gives us that 25% extra damage every 50 fury you spend, so that's very important. Unfortunately, we don't currently have great examples of legendaries to show you for the Barbarian, but in general, like the other classes, as I've talked about in this video, you want something that enhances what you're currently doing. So any of the 6 abilities you've picked, if it makes those better or more effective in some way, then that's good, but the main source of our damage is ultimately coming to things that help us build up and things that let us do more bleed damage. So if you found something with a legendary that does something like that, that's really good. But there you have it. Those are our 3 classes and some really good build suggestions for your leveling, and in general, all of these should be very strong and effective, and satisfyingly, they're all very different playstyles, which you should expect from different classes. If this video has helped you though, please do drop a like. It's taken a lot of work from all 3 of us to make these builds and get the footage and show this and work it all out. And with the second weekend where we have access to the Druid and the Necromancer, we're going to be looking into those soon. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.